Mike Mish, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you.
This is crazy. You were, I think, episode, either my fifth or sixth episode, maybe. No, like 10th or 13th.
Yeah, it was pretty early on.
Yeah, it was early on. It was in March or April.
Yeah.
And I am like at 52 episodes now.
Nice.
Or 53, whatever this episode ends up. But I appreciate you coming on. Last time we talked about business and, from the Your Platform podcast and transitioning now to the Open Exchange.
Yep.
I still want to keep the business stuff, but I think when I had you on, that was the sole focus of the episode where we talked about the mortgages, the type of mortgages you've done, how long you've been in mortgages, what you see for the future. I don't think we dived into politics at all, but today I wanted to have you back on because obviously I think we've developed a pretty good relationship in the last year or so.
Playing
golf and doing some business with each other.
Yep.
Having you on the podcast, going out for lunch,
Yeah.
which one I really appreciate. But you have shared some stuff with me that I actually don't know with you. You say maybe surface level stuff that you shared with me.
Yep.
And I'm interested on perspective from what you've gone through. You mentioned when I think we connected back in May, like, hey, let's get back together and do a show. It was family, it was faith, and it was, I think, your journey through AA.
Right.
And I believe you're also military, correct?
I'm not military.
No, you're not military.
Nope.
Okay.
Family's military.
Family's military. Got it. So the first thing I want to talk about is family, right? You're a dad of two?
Two. I have a
right?
7-year-old son, and my daughter will be 6 in April.
7-year-old and 6. Being a parent is fun. I've been a parent now for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
I just shared with you that we're expecting our third child here in April, and but it's also a learning curve. It's learning how to manage your own emotions, learning how to parent with your significant other, learning how to really be the best person for your family. Right.
Yep.
When you think about your first 7 years, or so you said 7 in what? I'm sorry, 7 in what?
And my daughter will be 6.
And 6. So, just about a year and a half or so.
14 months apart.
14 months apart, right? So that was probably challenging a little bit early on.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about the why behind the family, behind what you do,
Yeah.
what's that mean to you?
Oh, man. The why behind everything that I do is to, without a doubt, be the best father for my children and the best, husband to my wife, which is not what I thought for most of my life. I didn't think I would ever have kids. I never thought I would settle down and get married and live life very differently than I live now. I think the life now that I have is what I always wanted and intended to have. But I think I got caught up, like a lot of young people and in our generation and younger, that, you don't need to settle down. You don't need to have kids to have an enjoyable life. And then you realize that those are the most enjoyable things. And so when I talk to people now, it's weird because I'll tell people, get married, settle down, have kids young, because it's the best part of my life. And I wish I had done it earlier.
When you say that you wasn't the life that you necessarily, so you wanted this life, but you go through a journey of like, is this for me? Because of, social norms, right?
Yes.
That's what you would call it.
Absolutely.
Social norms, what's acceptable. It's interesting because, and I'll go to my point, but I'm doing a show tomorrow with my good friends, David Cruz and Jeff, who've both been on my show.
Yep.
David's been a reoccurring guest. Jeff Smith, I believe he's in real estate, works for Bud Bowes.
Yep.
But we're gonna touch on the Overton window. I don't know if you know about the Overton window, but the Overton window basically is this idea that ideas, if you will, start either on unthinkable ideas and thinkable ideas, and then they eventually flip. So case in point, in the 50s, it was acceptable to smoke cigarettes in a public place. It was cool. You could smoke in schools. You could do this. You could do that. And as the years go on, it became not acceptable.
Right.
And then, here we are, not acceptable because of the health risks and whatnot. And here we are in, 2025, and it's like, and smoking's down, like then from
Oh,
what
yeah.
it used to be, right? So the idea of what's socially acceptable or the social norms, it's interesting because that I feel like that kind of came back today, where people feel like I'm just gonna kind of do my thing. Gen Z not wanting to have children, or at least not that they don't want to have children, but kind of confused on whether or not that's something they want. But for you, what goes on in those years, right? For you, that is like up and down. You know what you wanted or want, and you kind of see the end game of your life, but you're going through some stuff. Probably what, in late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I mean, really, to me, a lot of those changes from how I was raised and how I looked at life changed dramatically when I went to college.
Mhm.
And I see that as a big turning point in my life. Like the ideals, the things that I thought were important, that I was raised in my parents and my family and everything. And I've had discussions like this with my uncle and other people about it. It was like I don't want to say it was like a switch, but I just looked at things differently. Like after college, meeting different people and, putting things that I didn't grow up with being super important, like material things, money, cars, partying, all of that type of stuff became like more of a focus than, my faith or family or, any of those things that I was kind of raised with. And that was really my focus. And it had a lot to do with, ego. You can look at all those different type of, things that people talk about, ego, or that was really probably the focus of it, that, it's what I want to do. I know best. This is what's important.
Yeah.
And kind of being kind of selfish and immature and those type of things.
That's normal though, right? Like for especially like for men, I think it's normal. I guess I don't want to say it's normal, acceptable, but I think it's normal to go through some of those things. I think ego, I mean, I talked to this with Danny Garcia on my last episode, that, ego is one of our biggest enemies. And I think that that's a defense mechanism.
Oh, absolutely.
And I believe that when you go through life understanding that there are different things, or you can attain this, you can do this, you can go and you can be a millionaire, let's just say, or you can be an insurance person, you can be a mortgage person, you can be, you could work as a body shop person. There's options that are available. You get clouded. You want, I think money early on is something that will fuel the gas to ego.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I started making a little bit of money in 2012, I was like, whoa, you forget who you are almost a little bit, that's something that I wish I was able to set, but like you said, it set back. But you said it's the ego.
Edging God out.
Hedging God out.
Edging
God out.
That's what I've always heard of it. And I heard that when I, through AA and sobriety and things, that was always the thing. That's one of the things that stuck with me. Like two things that I always heard was edging God out. And that's just one that I look at and you're like, yeah, that's what it is. We think we're the great, we're the center of the universe. We're the focus,
Real quick, just since we're on this topic, what was your faith like growing up as a kid? And then did you find faith through your journey with AA?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to church. My father was Catholic. My mom was United Methodist. So that's the church that I was raised in. Neither one of those religions, I would say, is really gives you like a good deep dive into like looking at and reading the Bible. It's a lot of, Catholic dogma, Protestant dogma, that type of stuff. But never read the Bible or any of that type of stuff growing up. But I, believed in God and, kind of just figured almost like agnostic, like it was there and that was it. I went to a Catholic college, but that didn't have anything to do with.
Where'd you go to school?
Assumption.
I thought, okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't mean anything.
No, nothing. So I mean, it always believed in God, but didn't really do anything that you would think of as following like a faith or trying to, be a good Christian or any of that type of stuff. And really, when I got sober and then through AA and sobriety, it led me back to, my belief in God, reading the Bible and doing all those type of things. Looking at things from that way with like a family man or with like talking to my kids about it.
Is this something your faith is you're open with your children, your family with like?
Have great conversations with my uncle who kind of got me into AA and then brought me along in that, brought me back to my faith, and he's like a second father to me.
Yes. With your children, so you said 9 years sober.
Yep.
Right.
On the 23rd.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So 9 years sober. You hadn't had kids yet.
No.
Right.
Nope.
Okay. So you are. So 2 years before you had your son, you were sober.
Yep.
Okay. When did you meet your wife?
Before I got sober.
Before I got sober. So she's part of this journey with you.
Yeah. Huge part.
Wow. What was the most difficult part of that with her in the sobriety journey? Because that's hard. I'm actually really interested in this because I'm going through this myself. Yep. I can't say that I'm doing it to just be sober completely. Yeah. Who knows what might happen? Yeah. But I'm taking it day by day just to see the impact it has on me, my faith, my discipline, my habits. Those are the three things that I'm really focused on because I believe when you want to make a change, you obviously have to start from within.
Yep.
And what I love about what you said is this had allowed you to get closer to God in your faith, right? Mm-hmm. And Danny Garcia said it the other day on our show, I think it was last Friday, he goes, I try to handle faith on my own without God. We go through life thinking we can handle it on our own. And just in these short 10 days that I've experienced this internal change, I can find myself thinking a little bit more clear. Oh, yeah. And again, I would have like 2 beers a night. Weekends I binge, right? I'll have like 3 or 4 beers, and usually it's like IPAs. Bowling, I binge. Yep. Drink probably more than that. And again, I didn't think it was necessarily a problem, but it was more so I need to change because I want to change from within. Mm-hmm. That's hard when you don't have support.
Very hard.
That's hard when in your mind, or as the Bible will call it, your flesh is telling you that no one's going to support you, that you're going to give into it. That's very difficult. What do you remember most being the most difficult times before you had your kids and having done that, dealing with this with your wife?
So when I got sober, I wasn't with my wife.
You were not with your wife?
I wasn't with anybody at that time.
Okay.
So when I was about probably a little over a year and a half sober when we got back together. We had been broken up at that time. I wasn't married or anything. So I had actively been working, at that time. I was out of the mortgage business. I got out of the mortgage business in 2014, 2015, and I was out of it for 3 or 4 years until I got back in 2019. So I think not having kids, not having a relationship, and being able to get down to back to the basics of kind of the basic building blocks of your life and building it back up from there. Definitely, I can't say because I didn't do it the other way, but if you have a family, if you have all those things, there's all those extra components that go into it that can certainly make it difficult. Right. Depending on, if you're somebody that's trying to quit because they just, drink a little too much once in a while, or somebody that's an everyday drinker or, drug user or whatever their drug of choice is.
What were you?
Alcohol was never really my problem.
Mm.
It was like painkillers.
Yeah.
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 So
That was during the height in like time when this stuff was happening?
yeah, I would say
Yeah.
it was, around that time. Like I had some injuries from some accidents and things like that. So it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say I know a lot of people that work in the, finance, mortgage industry and stuff that have, because it's also a way to deal with, people use it as stress reliever. And
Right.
real estate mortgages can be an extremely stressful environment. You have highs and lows, and so that, not as an excuse, but you can see a lot of it.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to use that and cope, and
It's a coping mechanism.
It becomes something that feels normal.
Yeah.
And it almost makes you feel normal, and
Takes the edge off.
It takes the edge off.
Yeah.
And it's ironic you said that going through that process is edging God out.
Yeah.
Right. And alcohol or drugs, that is exactly what that's doing. It's eliminating.
I mean, my whole life, but I didn't, when I was late teens, early 20s, college, after college, I was never what I would consider, like back then, like had a drinking problem or anything like that. But I could always get addicted to something throughout my life.
Yes.
I could get addicted to playing golf, and I had to do it like every day. I never really got addicted to school, which probably would have been beneficial. You know what I mean? But I could get addicted to anything, buying clothes, shopping, buying cars, like all of those different things. You're looking for something to fill a void.
The dopamine hit.
Yeah,
because
exactly. And so that was always, I would say for most of my adult life, I always used it. Although people would see me and be like, oh, he's outgoing, he's confident, he's, successful or this and that. I always use that type of stuff as a social, like I always say, a social lubricant.
Yeah.
I never really on the outside felt comfortable, but on the inside didn't always feel comfortable. So I used it as a crutch.
Right. I think it's easy to mask a lot of different things.
Oh yeah.
And I want to have these conversations with more men on my show.
Yeah. It's good to talk about that.
It's good to talk about it. And this is back-to-back episodes, and we're going to tap into it a little bit tomorrow. But I wonder what causes it, man. That's the hardest thing to pinpoint, right? I mean, obviously we can say it's trauma from childhood, it's things you've experienced, it's how interconnected we are as people, where we naturally want to compare ourselves to someone else, or just see things that people have. But that didn't really happen back then. Like 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, social media isn't what it was, or is today what it was 10 years ago. That continuously evolves. The amount of information that we get evolves. So I'll say it in the sense for our age group. Yeah. You're considered millennial?
No, I'm You're
Gen X. Gen X, okay.
1980.
1980.
I think that was the cutoff.
Yeah, all right. So I'm 1989, so I'm a millennial, but I still kind of think that's the same generation. Obviously, I didn't grow up, in that era. You're about 10 years older than me. But I just wonder what has caused this, because this isn't just something that just popped up in 2025 and 2024 and 2023, mental health and for what men struggle with. This is something that's been a long, like it's been going on for a very long time. I just wonder why, man. I really do.
I think previous generations, you were, if you showed anything other than, the warrior mentality, like, the strong, silent type, you were, it was looked at as a weakness. I think those times are changing.
You think it's getting better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are more open to talk about things. Mm-hmm. You're not looked down upon because you have people that, now because of social media, there's bad things out there, but you can see good things. Guys that, like I have friends and family that were ex-military. You get Navy SEALs and special forces, and these guys come out talking about struggles that they have. And if they can struggle through it and they're, the cream of the crop when it comes to being a warrior, then why can't the average man talk about these things, and I think it's better. I think for a long time in our society, it was kind of pushed down.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be. There's a lot of people that don't like to talk about sobriety because they're like, oh, what if somebody, looks down on you for telling your story, or
stigma.
When I got back in the mortgage business, there was rumors would fly, and I still hear them now where people say, oh, it's like, look, if you're worried about what I did 10, 12 years ago to myself, because now I'm sober and I wasn't back then, it's like, all right, well, then I just,
and
probably
people
not
can
somebody
change,
I want to
man.
work with either.
People can change.
Right.
People could change. I think the best thing is us as humans is we have the ability to reflect. That's one thing. Obviously, we're the only species that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
We can reflect. We can, whether it's holding ourselves accountable or making an excuse, we have that ability. I think I'm reading. Have you ever read the book "Good to Great" by Jim Collins?
No.
So it's basically so Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod, who else was there? There's a couple of other guys that were on a panel, and somebody in the audience asked, what are some of the best business acumen books that you would recommend to read or follow? The first thing A-Rod said was there's a podcast called Founders, really good podcast, by the way, and he basically reads the autobiographies of entrepreneurs. And then he unpacks it on their show. So that's a good one. But then he mentioned Jim Collins' Good to Great. And he said it's just basically a 3-step framework where it's disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action.
Yep.
I don't know that, and I'll just use me for an example. It's easy to be like, hey, be disciplined, right? But I don't know if I was ever taught that. I don't know if I was ever taught by, and I don't mean like taught by, here, read this, become disciplined, right? Even reading my books. I read a ton of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of things that help me. And I take some of the stuff and I practice it, right? But even that still, you still struggle with things. I didn't have anybody to teach me by displaying it. And now that can go into a broader argument that, well, listen, I had somebody around, they taught me this, and I'm still not disciplined. But I do think that there's levels to that. I think that when my kid sees me working down here till 5, 6 o'clock at night, or 7 o'clock, open up the computer or take a call from you because you need something, I think that instills hard work. Oh, my dad was always working hard, this and that. But I think we do lack the discipline in general. So I have a hard time building off of discipline, right?
Yep.
They call it habit stacking, atomic habits. What habits have you created throughout your journey? Because that's what you have to do. I did a show the other day about my first week of dry January, which, probably cliche or whatever, but, because everybody's not drinking in January, but it was an easy way for me to start.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm doing it on my show is because it allows me to, one, tell my audience, hey, here's what I'm doing. My audience sees me outside, and if they see me with a drink, they know that I'm full of, crap.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to hold myself accountable. I can jot it down. I could tell you off mic. I could tell my friends, tell my wife, I'm not going to drink, but then, whatever. It's, it's Friday. I'm going to have a drink. 10 days so far. I'm very proud of it. Anyway, but the one thing that I talked about during the show, that I, did the unpacking of the 1 week, is that with habits, it's the cue, the routine, and then the reward. So for me, I bowl on Monday nights. I shared with you earlier. I drink a lot on Monday nights, and it's just the relaxation. It's the fun. I'm bowling with my guys and stuff like that. That is something that the cue is showing up. People know that I was there, that I show up and I'm there. I know that the vibe is to drink and bowl. It's kind of like golfing, crack open 9 o'clock in the morning. We're going to drink and play golf. And then the reward is the relaxation, right? The relaxation of the drink in itself. And I feel relaxed. I'm bowling kind of good, whatever the case might be, or I'm golfing really good. And then the routine is the drinking in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to replace the routine.
Mm-hmm.
You have to replace the action. What did you do during your journey of having to replace the routine? Because the cues are going to be there and the rewards are always going to be there. You're still going to find a way to be relaxed. Because when I left, that I was like, I felt good. I felt great after because I didn't drink on Monday. But while I was there, the act of me not being in the routine of having a drink,
Yeah.
I was like, man, this stinks. Like I kind of want to have a beer right now. But I didn't.
Right.
When you go through your journey, thinking about what I just said,
Yeah.
what were some of the things that you had to change in your routines?
I mean, you definitely had to, like for me, I had to change social habits. So I don't go out to bars socially, not because I don't necessarily worry about drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go because, now married, couple kids, when you do those social setting type of things, like we were talking about a little bit before about like, things with work and that type of stuff. If you have a set amount of time throughout your week, if you replace the social time, unless it's not work related, and you get rid of those, like bowling or something like on the weekends, guys that play softball, do all that stuff. I replaced a lot of those things that often could be revolving around drinking with spending time with my kids, like coaching, doing stuff on the weekends. I'm definitely not the best at it because one of the things that I've been easily able to replace, like, getting hyper focused on, because I've always done that throughout my life, being, a little bit more ADD, ADHD. I can get hyper focused on work. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I have to be cognizant about. Like, we just built our house a few years ago. And so I had a lot doing that. And then with work being busy and trying to grow that and always saying, well, I'm doing all this work so I can provide for my kids. And then you get to a certain point where it's like, well, how much work your kids don't need, all of everything.
Yeah.
They need you, especially at these ages.
Right.
So trying to get a better balance of working and not letting it control my life and making sure I'm doing the things. So like that you just said about, somebody teaching you, like I can show my son, things around the house, little things.
Hit the ball 100 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. Taking him golfing, coaching baseball, coaching basketball. So all of that stuff, I really had an easy transition with, because I wasn't, I wasn't just moving from, going out all the time and then boom, right into this. So I was doing more activities that were, positive at the time. Like I was going to meetings, going to church, focusing on that stuff.
Yeah.
And so
what was the hardest time? So like you hear stories. I watched, you see things. I know people, that there is a relapse, that people relapse.
Yep.
Did you experience that in your 9 years?
No,
Wow.
I haven't.
Wow.
When I stopped, I had gotten into a car accident. I got injured. And it was a wake up call for me there. But you hear people say it, like at a certain point, living that type of lifestyle, you just get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
So, now like not being hungover, none of those things, like life is
good.
When you're in sobriety, like I think life is pretty easy. Like it's great. You're not worried about things that you did or mistakes that you made or anything like that. Nobody's perfect with everything.
Of course.
But I find it to be a much easier lifestyle than, partying, going out, spending money, doing all this stuff, buying all these things and never being happy. Like you get to a certain point where you're very content.
Patrick Bet-David, and I don't know if this is something he coined, but he I've heard him say it on his show. I listen to him all the time. I tune in pretty much every week, twice a week, whenever he's like my news outlet, right?
Yep.
But he said there's three times that three things in life where people change. First, it's intentional, right? You know what? And I'll make this full circle because what you just said to me, I had never heard, but it makes sense from what he says. So he goes, first, people change intentionally. Man, I weigh too much. I'm having some health complications. Like, they're not health complications, but I feel crappy. Like I'm overweight. Like, you know what? I'm gonna make this change in my life. I'm gonna start working out. I'm gonna eat better. Not gonna drink. kind of like what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
I'm really just trying to limit the drinking. I want to lose some weight. I want to just make sure that I get my mind right.
Yep.
The second part is unintentional. You go to the doctor, hey, you know what? You have high cholesterol or you have, high blood pressure. So you have to do those. So there's intentional and unintentional. He also said accidental.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time since I've heard this, which is probably a year or 2 years ago, I just heard the accidental incident that caused this to change.
Yeah.
When you go through that accident, I can't imagine. I've never been in a big car accident. Like it was a car accident.
Oh, I've been in a bunch.
You've been in a bunch.
Dude, if you looked at my driving record from 10 years ago or more, you'd be like,
uninsurable.
Jeez,
Decline.
Yeah. I lived fast. That's the easiest way you could say it.
Yeah. I meant to when I kind of went off on a tangent, but when I was asking about your family and how you display your faith, I'm curious on that because I'm a man of faith. My faith journey started when I was 16 years old. I was invited to a church. The big reason why I went to the church was because I was invited by one of my college teammates who was working, or high school teammates who was working out with Rajay Davis at the time. Yeah. And Rajay Davis went to the church and they're like, yo, come on, let's go to church. You can go Rajay. I'm like, Major League Baseball player, I'm in. But I found at 16,
God works in mysterious ways.
Within like, I don't know, I would say probably a month, I found myself really entrenched in the faith, right? I shared this a couple of times in my episodes, so I won't unpack it like I have. But fast forward throughout the years, I had a real volatile relationship with God, not him with me with him, right? And as I'm here and I have 2 kids and have a third on the way, I believe that the display of faith, the display of following Christ is I'm not trying to be politically correct because I don't care.
Right.
But I do think that it is something that needs to happen. I have a hard time with it because I don't know how. And I think that it goes down to, and I had this conversation with someone yesterday, that I have to first immerse myself in the relationship so they can see that I'm doing the relationship, having relationship. Like I don't know, what was that like for you? Like, it's because I think that there's extremes. I think when you think of, and I don't like to call it religion, I like to call it a faith and a relationship. But the people who think otherwise, or I think they'll say it's religion, right? It's religion. It is what it is. But it's hard to understand how to go that route, and really display it and show it, because like I don't want it to come off as like indoctrination, if you will, right? Yeah. What do you think about that?
I mean, with our kids, I talk to my children probably daily about God, about Jesus Christ. Doing things. And that was always something like growing up, like everybody always told you like, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. Tend to find, my kids respond better when I'm not telling them what to do, which is kind of how I was raised.
Right.
That generation, it was like, this is why you do it. Why? Because I told you so.
Yeah.
It didn't always, kind of work. But if you display it through your own works and what you do, being a good person, not maybe putting on social media, but if you're out there and you see somebody that needs something and you're with your kids, you give them a couple bucks. Mm-hmm. You buy them some food.
Yeah.
And then you explain to them why you did it, why, daddy decided to do this or why daddy did this, and they can see it. And then using those type of real world things and saying, because this is what God wants us to do. This is what Jesus wants us to do. Yeah. Take care of each other. It's hard to do an all-encompassing thing, especially with young kids, because everybody then says, well, you look at something this way, how would God, look at something politically this way. And it's,
I feel like that has to be disconnected a
Yeah.
little bit. You can't connect politics to religion.
Right.
I think politics, I think that there's the extremes of politics, right? You got the far left, you got the far right, and there are segments of those groups that entrench themselves in a specific religion and vice versa, not at all, right? That's not who God is. That's not who God called us to be. I believe that, at the end of the day, we are all made in his image. I believe that truly. And that doesn't, and I said this before, it doesn't mean that you and I, I look in the mirror and I see God, but I do believe when we go to the book of Genesis, when he says he breathed in us the breath of life, there's a reason why we are able to think the way we do, act the way we do, achieve the things that we are able to achieve. And we can go down the conversation of why do certain things happen in this world, the fires, the this, the death. We could save that for another conversation. But the idea that politics and religion are the same, it's not.
Right.
It's not. Now, when you think of order, right? When you think of order and you think of government, yes, for sure, right? There was order in biblical times there was a hierarchy that's very much how there is today. But if there's no order, then there's chaos, right? So there's that. But the for the lack of a better term, people shouldn't be throwing stones in glass houses. I don't want to go too crazy on that.
Hey.
But I want to get to a point and I'm really, the reason why I'm doing, like I said, the dry January and drinking is because I really want to get to a point where I can get close to God. I can't get close to God when I'm doing things that are keeping me away from God, that are distracting me away from God. And I want my kids to see that. What are some of the surprising lessons that you have learned from your family, your children, being a dad?
That's a tough one. I mean, I learn from my kids every day. I'm truly now especially with their age, because when they're baby, like I loved, and it's crazy when I tell people this, but as a father, like my favorite stage was when they were babies.
Yeah.
Like that was, I don't know what it is about. I love babies. Like I'll go to, family functions where people have babies and there's like a crying baby and I can hold one and they calm down. Children have always gravitated towards me. They say good energy. I hope I put out good energy.
Yeah.
But
you know what's interesting about that, and I mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So I can't say that those those stages are fun.
Yeah.
Lack of a better term. Like they're grueling, you're tired. But I think it's one of the most intimate stages of the parenthood. And what I've learned, two things, that our children love us. Why? Because we first love them.
Right.
Why does God love us? Or why do we love God?
Because he's loved us.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think
there's a lot of parallels in that relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
you can discipline your kids and still love your kids and not give in to every whim that they want. Just like, God's not going to give in to every whim that we have.
And what I think what you're saying is, and what I kind of interpret, I think when babies are are here, when they come, that's the closest to God that I could ever feel.
Yeah.
Because creation.
And they're 100% relying on you. Like we should rely on God for all aspects of our life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off on what lessons you learned, but it kind of just came there. But yeah, so like when you think about the lessons you've learned from your children, like what are some things that stick out?
I mean, I would say for my son, like he's like all the things that I wasn't as a kid. Like he's physically, he's gifted, he's drawing now, he's doing all these physical talents. But the way he he's worried about others, which I was always, I never really noticed it, but he's such a kind and caring kid. That to me is like, I'm in awe of him.
Yeah.
When I see him, because he's like, oh, you're worried about, not worried about it, but he gets it right there. He gets it. He's more in tune with the world than most adults.
Your children are homeschooled.
Homeschooled.
How long have they been homeschooled? The whole life?
Whole life.
Whole life. Why? What is it that,
No.
again, not to go too crazy into just curious, because it sounds like, I think homeschoolings continue to rise. We can save that for another episode on what we think why, but I want your opinion on why you chose this for your children.
Yeah, I think the way we were raised in school, I think a lot of things have changed with public education. And the things that they focus on now, I'm not saying that they're wrong. It's just I wanted more of my kids to be able to be around my wife's horse farm with the animals. We have land. I don't know.
Is there a social aspect to them, like outside of? I mean, obviously, your kid plays golf. He does sports and stuff like that.
Sports.
So that still is there. Yeah,
they're still around other kids at the barn, and interacting and socializing and doing all that. It's not like
you're not isolating them.
When we were growing up, when I was growing up, it was like the homeschool kids
they weren't around.
It was like
showed up at graduations. Like, who are you?
Yeah, it was like a different. Like they looked at things differently, and now you're starting to see more of it, more organically. Where the kind of post World War II idea of public education, where it was very regimented, very scheduled, and that type of stuff, has kind of gone by the wayside. And
what grade is he in?
He would be technically, I think, going into first grade.
Your son, right now, okay.
And
he's being taught by your wife.
Yep, and my mother-in-law, and then we also have a lady that's a teacher that comes in 3 days a week.
Where do you get the curriculum?
The teacher. She worked in the public school system for years, and you're starting to see more of that, where teachers are getting burned out, or just they don't want to go with the fact that you have to follow what the federal Department of Education or the state Department of Education. I mean, it's just. It's very different. And I don't necessarily see it because obviously I haven't been in school forever. But I have friends and family that work in school systems, and they'll say like, a lot of them like they just want to get to retirement until they can get their pension and get out, and they don't want to deal with all of the politics and all that different type of stuff that goes on.
I don't know. My son goes to kindergarten next year. And we're going to send him to Salem public schools. And obviously, I hear things from media outlets, the PBDs, the Joe Rogans, pretty much anything. I mean, anything on X, anything that you want to find about the public school system. And one of the things I found that was the most, I would say profound, is that we're 39th in the world in education.
Right.
We weren't like that 50 years ago.
We've steadily declined since the Department of Education. And when we have conversations about like my thoughts on the federal government and stuff, I mean, nothing the federal government ever does ever gets better. It gets worse. We've steadily declined from when it was created in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. We spend more, per child on public education than most other, quote unquote civilized countries. Right. And we have less return. Yeah.
So that's probably another reason why you you did the
that more definitely that more libertarian type of let me do my own thing and I'll figure it out, and I don't want the government's help, and don't tell me what to do.
That seems hard, man. That seems hard, especially does your wife work, or she's just
she has a horse barn.
She has the horse barn. Okay, so that's the source of income for you, and then obviously you in the mortgages. So you got your mother-in-law, you said, and then you have a teacher. So there's balance there. There's a little bit of balance there, and it sounds like, and I forgot who I was talking to the other day, but they were like, yeah, homeschool kids are there for 2 hours and then they're done. Is that about right? Like 2-3 hours and they get everything done?
That's it. 3 days a week, 2-3 hours.
Yeah. And what about when it comes to standardized testing and stuff like that? Do they do the same testing that the kids in public school do?
Oh, I don't know. I don't believe that they'll do any of that testing.
Gotcha.
And everybody has a different way of, with what they want their their kids
Sure.
to grow. Like for me personally, where I am in what I've lived for my own life, if you said to me, you know, is your focus on your kids going to college someday? I would say that it's probably the least thing that I worry about at all.
Yeah.
I want them to be good people.
Right.
I want them to be well adjusted.
Yeah.
And I want them to do something that they enjoy,
Right.
not do it for the money.
Right.
Which is why I went to college, because I was going to get a big fancy job.
What'd you go to college for?
Accounting and finance.
Accounting. Wow.
Get a big fancy job, wear a suit, and have an office and be important. And it's like,
Yeah. What's that? What's important? I mean, right.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, my son works, at this age, he goes on job sites with my father-in-law, owns an excavation company, and he's getting that kind of like organic, real world education.
Right.
Things that I got some of, a lot of people in my family, my uncle, they're business owners, and my mom, and not focused on them getting, involved in the rat race. I want them to be able to get something that they enjoy, whatever it is that they do.
Right.
And focus on doing something they love.
Yeah, and a lot of that goes underlooked. Like, I listen, I think that, again, balance, right? I think that, again, my wife, she works at the magnet school in New London, science, technology, engineering, and math. Perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, I love those are the four things that is a big focus in that school. Now, I don't know what other schools are like or anything like that, but science, technology, engineering, and math, the way things are going, man, I could produce this show probably in 5 years with me and you not sitting here and we can have the same conversation. Like, I've seen things from a technology standpoint that's evolved. Like, it's insane, and I do think that that skill is important. Like, I feel like I've been using ChatGPT, for example, for 3 years, 3 years. And people then were like, no, don't use that. It's going to take our jobs in a year, but it's not. If you use ChatGPT the right way, it can be a really helpful assistant, a really helpful tool, which an asset. That's what I use it for. Yeah. But if you ask me, if I started using ChatGPT now, if I didn't hear about it when I heard about it, and my curiosity, came out, because my curiosity was like, what is that? Let me figure this out. If you ask me if I was using it today for the first time, I'd be like, no, never. I would never use it. Like, that's crazy. Like, you get caught up in that. So with technology, I think that, so technology, I think that kids adapt to that very quickly these days. Yeah. And I don't know what technology is like with you in your household. We really, like, my kids watch like cartoons here and there, like stuff like that. They don't have tablets. We're not going to give them phones. We're not going to give them tablets. Like, we're not going to, when we go to dinner or go to lunch out to a restaurant, you look around, you got that family right there on their phone. Every single one that's sitting there on their phone. This kid's on their tablet. We have people in our circle that they're on their kid. They let their kids just have their phone with, like, we don't need a babysitter. We want to spend time with our children. And that's something that we really agree on.
My kids call me on user, because I'm on it a lot because of work.
Right.
And I'm always available, nights, weekends, and everything. My kids don't have tablets. They watch we don't have cable, so they watch a little bit of TV here and there. No phones. Yeah. They're doing.
Yeah. I think some people, so going back to the Overton window, right? Yeah. Some people, hearing this will say that's really extreme. Others will be like, no. Yeah. I think we're going to get to a middle point with all of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I do. I think we're going to get to that window. And interested to see what happens. I think obviously socially is what people will deem acceptable or not. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes.
Like that, what you just said about that Overton, like, to me, I'm at the point where it's like, I hope when the way I've looked at life and kind of what I've been through was completely opposite of what I was at 21 or 22. Yeah. So if you ask me now, I would hope that my kids, do whatever they want that they love to do when they get older.
Right.
But I would love to see my son get into some type of a trade, like a high-end welding, doing excavation, HVAC, electrical, building, something with the trades.
Those jobs aren't getting replaced.
Those aren't getting replaced. Like the company that my uncle owns in Norwich, that I grew up working around and stuff like that. That I would love to see him do that. And in that same token, if somebody asked me, I would love to see my son, where I settled down and had kids later in life. Right. I would love to see my kids get married young and have kids young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of the opposite norm
Right.
of whatever, you know, it's
Right.
go have all your fun, do all this, do all that, and then settle down later. And it's like, why are we telling people to do that when like for most people that I've talked to that, you know, have a spouse and have kids, it's the most enjoyable part of their life.
Right.
So
it really is.
Why,
Having kids is awesome.
Why wait to do what, you know, I think gives us the most joy and happiness in our lives.
It really does. And it's to that point, like I was leaving to an e-car event yesterday, the installation for Kathy Gagno. And as I'm leaving, my son is like, Dad, don't go. And it just like, man, it just like really melted me. And the love that there is no, you cannot put a number or a label on the amount of love. There's just no definition for the amount of love that we have for our children. There's no explanation. You can say I love you to the moon and back, and that still wouldn't define the love.
Right.
You know,
it's like networking and those things. I don't do, you know, compared to what some people might say, I don't do enough anymore. If I do one event or something like that once a month, like that's a lot. And it's because, you know, I'm there every day when my kids wake up, and I'm there every night when they go to bed. Yeah. That's most important to me. Yeah. Doing that type of stuff to make a little bit of extra money or even make a lot of extra money doesn't
yeah, man,
you know,
I love that.
It's not my reason for being or anything.
Yeah. So you're mid 40s, right?
44.
44. What's
45 this year.
When's your birthday?
August 19th.
Oh, mine's August 10th.
Yeah. A couple Leos.
Like 36.
Yeah.
You know, what do you have set out for you? You know, you're getting to that point in life that, you know, you had the 7-year-old, the 6-year-old, and 10 years, 17 and 16, your career, your family. What do you got in mind? What's happening? What would you like to set out for yourself? What are some other goals that you want to hit? Obviously, it sounds like from our conversation today, family goals are number one.
Yep.
Spending time with them, doing things. But I do think we do have to take care of ourselves. I'm not saying on a materialistic way, like, you know, house, cars, things like that. What do you want for yourself in the next 10 years?
Peace. Continued peace. You know what I mean? We built our house. You know, my wife has a business that she's growing and building stuff around her horse farm and stuff like that. And, you know, with everything with where we are and where we live and the land that we have and stuff, just kind of, you know, continuing to build a home. Yeah. Like adding, you know, eventually I want to get some cows. The kids want goats, more chickens, and just, you know, having a garden. Yeah. Staying in the mortgage business. Yeah. Because I do enjoy it. I enjoy it because what I've done over the last 4 or 5, 6 years has now set me up where I don't have to chase it. Sure. And so I have a little bit more of, you know, continuity with it. And that's yeah. Nobody's asked me that recently. That's a good question.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So,
but just spending more time with my kids and spending more time with my parents as they spend half the year in Florida.
Right? Yeah.
Golfing with my father more. You know, he's going to be 73. So, you know, those things that you start to look at as your parents get older and things. And
you know, that what you just said reminds me. You ever hear that song by John Mayer, "Stop This Train"?
Yep.
Love that song so much, man, because that's what it is, man. Yep. This train is moving fast.
And everybody that I've talked to that has kids, you know, friends, family that are 17, 18 now or in their early 20s, they said once you get, you know, your kids are 6, 7, 8 years old, from now until they're 18 goes by in the blink of an eye.
I feel like that. My son's 4 and he'll be 5 in April, man. And I feel like that, you know, obviously 2020 was fast because COVID. There's a lot of things that just didn't happen. But he's going to be 5, bro. Like that's insane. It's insane, you know. And the one thing that I realized throughout this process is it's not that it's going any faster, right? But the time lapse appears quicker because we're getting older. Each year gets faster. Here we're mid-January already. Yep. Mid-January. Yeah. 2025. it just seems like it was just 2020. COVID just happened.
Yeah.
You know, I just graduated it feels like that, but it was 15 years ago that I graduated high school. It was, 11 years ago that I graduated college.
Yeah.
You know, it's insane. And I listen to probably Stop This Train, I would say 100 times a year.
Yeah.
I love that song because it just is that depiction of how fast life moves, and it helps, not the song per se, but when I think about it, it's like it helps me put things into perspective a little bit. Because when I think about my life, I like to break it down. I'm 35, so I like to break it down in segments. 0 to 5, don't remember.
Yeah.
5 to 10, a little bit.
A little bit.
I remember a lot from 10 to 20.
Right.
Okay. So baseball and all that stuff that I did. I graduated college. 20 to 30, I remember. Here we are.
Right.
Life is starting.
Right.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at, kind of the overall, focus on it, because as things do start to move faster, especially in, the industries that we work in, it's easier to get focused on work and business. And yet you do have to find that happy medium. Like my uncle, he's been a business owner for 40 something years. And I'll tell you, like, don't give up family time or that type of stuff for focusing on work. You can always make more money.
Yeah.
You kids are off to college, or they settle down and move away. And, if I'm 45 now, let's say it's when I'm in my mid to late 50s. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not out, beating up my body in a job so I'll probably work into my, early to mid 70s. Mm-hmm. You can still make money.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. Like I always try to focus on is not giving up that special time for work. And I'm not great at it. So I can get better at it.
I think that's something that we all have to work on. I bowled every Monday night for the last forever, 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years. And, I have an event probably twice a month. That's 2 days that I'm not with my family at night, that I'm not putting my kids to bed. And that stinks, man. I love putting my kids to bed. I love doing that. Yeah. We read them books. We goof around. Yeah. I love that so much. Yeah. But it's hard because it's balance, right? I think that, with the demands of this world and bringing in a third into this world, as a man, your instinct is to want to provide, and you sacrifice time for providing for your family, and in turn hope that this is what's going to be meaningful, if that makes sense. And
being a provider, paying your bills, being a provider overall as a father is the most
rewarding.
It's the most rewarding, aside from any work accolades or anything. Like, I think that is something that is discounted or not talked about, of how much as a man, those things, when you're the responsible person, the head, if you're the head of the household or however your household's structured, but those things give you such a sense of meaning. Yeah. Good word. Yeah.
Meaning.
I think that's extremely important. And I don't think people realize it, or it's not talked about as much with men.
Yeah. Seriously. So, Mike, this was good. This was a lot better than, I don't say a lot better, but I like these conversations.
Yeah.
I want to have more of them.
Yeah.
I want more men to come on and talk about these things. Not just men. I want to talk with everybody about all sorts of things. I'm still going to keep the business aspect to it.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate your vulnerability
and
sharing some of the things that some people don't feel comfortable sharing. And I think that where we are today, that's going to, I think, bring more people to the middle, in the sense of feeling centered of who they are, where they are in life. And your story might resonate with somebody.
Yeah.
My story, what I'm going through, might resonate with somebody. So I appreciate your time and being able to do this with me again today.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
I
Mike.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.